many seconds, Josh? Now, now the anticipation's happening for me.
Good afternoon, everybody all around the world, and welcome to another Therapeutic Thursday. My name is John Quick, as hopefully some of you know by now. I'm a fellow aortic dissection survivor of now 18 years out. I had a type A dissection, which resulted in open heart surgery and a replacement titanium aortic valve and a rebuild of part of the ascending arch. And subsequently, I dissected further down, as many of you all know is very common. And I've been living with a type B dissection all the way down through the abdomen, which bifurcates into my left leg. And that, as many of you will have the same approach, is managed with defensive blood pressure medication and beta blockers. And at the moment, that is all stable. Today, as is in keeping with this format at the moment, I am joined by Terry Alley, who is a carer, who joins me, and we're going to be talking about how it is to be a carer, what that experience is like, how that has maybe changed her life, what are some of the pressures and stresses, what's often on her mind and how she copes with that. So without further ado, welcome, Terry.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the opportunity to join your call today. I've been on previous calls and they're all excellent. So thank you for the honor of letting me be here.
Well, lovely to have you with us. So why don't we begin by talking about being a carer? And obviously this was, I guess, something that you weren't it wasn't on your lifetime table, as it were. Came out of somewhat out of the blue, I imagine, but obviously has involved enormous life adjustments, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting that, well, let me preface this by saying it's interesting that I had a background in cardiology and particularly in research. So I knew about this subject or this disease, aortic disease, prior to dealing with it personally. But as you identified, it's not something anybody ever expects to have happen. So my husband had some routine screening, and he had a lung CT. And when he had the lung CT done, they identified a benign nodule. The doctor called and said, "Hey, good news, you only have a benign nodule in your lung. However, we need to let you know that we've identified an aortic aneurysm." And we were both just completely floored. I had been married to my husband. We were high school sweethearts and had reconnected many years later. And I had been married to my husband for 1 year at that point.
Ah,
So
so that definitely wasn't in the plan.
Absolutely. And it was a life changer for both of us, for sure. In learning of his diagnosis, because I had a background in research, I immediately dove into researching family history to see if anybody else had the same issues. And we didn't identify that anybody had aortic disease per se, but we did identify that the family had a long history, and quite extensive history of connective tissue disorders. And then we scheduled genetic testing as well.
So just on that point, what was that an immediate suspicion of yours? I mean, because for a lot of us, we would have been clueless about that, but you obviously knew. But that was one of your prime suspects, was it, as it were?
Absolutely. And I think you're right. That probably came from my background. And I also remember back in nursing school many years ago, we talked about different body types and what diseases usually go along with different body types as people age and things to watch for. And he has all of the markers of somebody with Marfan's without an official true diagnosis of Marfan's, but he had all the markers for connective tissue disorder. And I knew, because I had grown up with him, I knew a lot of his background. I knew that he had issues with an overbite and had to wear braces and had a back injury in his adult years. And all of those things were like pieces of a puzzle that instantly clicked together for me.
So let's just spend a moment then, if you don't mind, going through some of what would be typical of a Marfan person, what might be some of the symptoms? Because you obviously have a fair bit of knowledge of this, and I too have some indications of Marfan.
Between the two of us, we can probably come up with a good list.
Yes,
It's been a number of
absolutely.
years since I looked that up, but having known that he had a problem with overbite and he had worn braces, a lot of times you find that there are jaw or skeletal deformities, quote unquote deformities. So that was the first clue. He's very, very tall and lanky. So I know that when folks are very tall, that diseases such as this are very prevalent. And I'm sorry, someone's trying to beep into me and I'm ending that call. So I
Okay,
lost
don't
my.
worry. Yeah.
Anyway, so I found out that that was an issue. We had dated for several years prior to getting married, and I knew he had had a history of L4 and L5 lumbar disc punctures or ruptures. So that again is a marker of a connective tissue disorder. He
I
also
didn't
had a
actually know that. That was a symptom.
yep. He also had a shoulder problem where he tore his labrum. So any of those things that are connective tissues, you have connective tissues that hold your spine in place, that hold your vertebrae in place. You have connective tissues that hold your jaw in a specific spot. Um, Same thing with the shoulder. That's all connective tissue. So
So,
at that
so
point,
on that point, the role of the connective tissue is to be the glue then, and
correct.
it is what's the problem there then that the connective tissue is weak?
In his case, and he is a rare case, but in his case, he's actually missing what's called the tunica media. That is a layer. There are three layers of arterial walls or vessel walls. The middle layer is called the tunica media, and that's the part of the vessel wall that allows for elasticity. So when your heart pumps and it's pushing blood through, obviously it's expanding those vessels. And then as the heart rests for a moment, it contracts again. Well, he's
Yep.
missing that section that gives him that elasticity. So he went from, I think at diagnosis, he was about 4.8 or 5.0 centimeters. And normally, no, it was less than that. Normally, they wait till 5.0 before they will do any corrective procedures. But because I researched his family history and we found out he had a cousin who had pectus excavatum, which is a very concave chest.
So,
That's
which, by the way, is a classic symptom of Marfan, isn't it? The,
it
the
is.
concave chest. Yeah.
Yep, and he also developed pulmonary stenosis as a result. Also, that cousin did. Um, Surprisingly, many of the members of my husband's family, mostly males, all died in their early 70s of heart failure.
Okay.
None of them had autopsies, so nobody knew official diagnoses. None of them had had a diagnosis of aortic disease. My husband is Pakistani descent, so I think the country his family hails from and their lack of ability to research those things or have adequate medical treatment or medical follow-up because of where they lived played into that certainly. But I think there was
Absolutely.
one.
And I could tell a similar story of suspicions within my own family on the Irish side, where, it's about where medical science was. It was about poverty. It was about, access to facilities where you look at one particular person in the family, you think, that looks like that could have been an aortic rupture.
Did you also find, John, that even if family members were suspicious of something that and when we identified to other family members that my husband did in fact have an aortic aneurysm and it was quite serious, the family members are afraid to have that genetic testing for fear that they might have to identify for themselves that they have something to be concerned about, nor will they even go to a doctor or a cardiologist to have an echocardiogram to find out if they have that existing as well.
I mean, I can't speak for individuals within the family, but to an extent, that is an impression I have. Not universally, but it's kind of. And I also wondered if mine hadn't happened out of the blue. What would my attitude be to that? Would it be ignorance is bliss? You know,
Yes,
um,
absolutely.
there's a lot. This is one of the things, isn't it? There's a lot of fear in this with all of this, and that fear also plays out when it comes round to the annual scan and things like that. What might be out there? What's happened?
Yes. absolutely. So, and I'm sorry, I lost direction of
No,
our
you
original
were
question.
talking about, in the family, the genetic disposal towards it. So logically, then let's pick up the narrative there. So a substantial aneurysm was identified, and I'm guessing then a decision was made, partly through your own advocacy, to operate.
Yes, and this aneurysm was identified in April, I believe, of 2019 when he was diagnosed. It was a let's look into it, let's keep an eye on it, let's see you again in a year and see if there's any advancement of that aneurysm or any growth with that aneurysm. I knew because he had the family history, and I knew because physically he met it ticked all the boxes for him having this disease, that he had a predisposed condition where it could expand at a lot greater rate, and it was also at higher risk for rupture with a lower measurement. So they wanted to wait till it hit at least 5.0
Is
before
that
they,
because of missing that middle layer primarily?
yes, because of what his specific condition is.
Yeah,
So we went to one cardiology group, and because of my background in nursing, I insisted that we saw heads of departments because I wanted to
right.
make sure I had
So
top
what I'm
people.
picking up there, and let's also remind ourselves that this is about you, is you were obviously doing a huge amount, right from the get-go, as soon as you knew about this. And so, is that the case? It seems like it was. But how was that for your own state of mind and your own anxiety and so forth?
Um, yes, that was absolutely the case, and I was absolutely the advocate there, and it took getting us to three different hospitals before somebody recognized the urgency. So initially, I felt very challenged, which I love. I love a good challenge, and it was right in the field where I had knowledge. But
Mhm.
sometimes knowledge is a scary thing, right? So I was also immediately terrified at the same time, and felt tremendous pressure to be that person who jumped in to save the day. So there was a lot of pressure on me to make sure that he got to the right place and that we got this addressed quickly. We were able to do that, and I'm so grateful for my background, and I'm so grateful I had the resources available to me and I knew who to reach out to, because had I not, I truly believe he would not be alive today. So that was tremendous pressure on me.
Well, I mean, you have a huge head start there on most of us, don't you? Which is great. But in some ways, it's the dice rolled badly in there being this event in the first place, but it also came up with good numbers in terms of that you had this knowledge.
It did, and it also made me very aware of the fact that there are not the resources available, and the knowledge is not necessarily there for everybody going through this. And I had shared with you that I had experienced my father having a heart surgery, and he had had a cataract replaced. And when he had a widowmaker heart attack, and when they had to drop his blood pressure for the surgery, it killed the cataract implant, or the retinal implant. I'm sorry. So he went traumatically blind, and I was amazed at the lack of resources available for a patient and family to help support somebody that was blind. And it was just the same for aortic disease. I was just astounded at how little resources and how little direction you're given are available to patients
So,
and family members.
so would that be a comment that you'd make that it's patchy across the US? I mean, would it be the same thing in a major city like New York or Los Angeles, or I don't, I know some obviously about the demographics, but is it quite state variable?
It is, and I think because I worked primarily in research, I don't have a lot of experience with patient care in cardiology, but it was absolutely my experience. My opinion, many years into nursing, is most patients are left on their own to do their own research, get their own follow up. Again, when he was diagnosed, it was, well, we did the scan, we found it, we measured it, we had an echo done at a hospital that was less than top notch. So it wasn't the best quality echo. When we finally got to the top notch facility, they did something that was much more extensive and showed him a lot more information. But had I
You
not,
see, I wouldn't, to be perfectly honest with you, I wouldn't know the difference between a good a good echo and a bad echo, frankly. I
yeah,
mean,
there's a 2D. Most hospitals and most cardiologists will give you a 2D echo, and they required at least a 3D echo so that they could see all the way around what was happening with the aortic
right.
arch. So his aneurysm was an aortic arch aneurysm. So starting at the aortic valve up through the arch and
Hmm.
very small period down to the descending, and he hasn't dissected beyond that at this point.
So that's a pretty extensive aneurysm, isn't it? I mean, that's going a long way out of the heart from the root up and just over to the top.
Correct. So it's just past the coronary artery, probably an additional inch beyond the coronary artery, which
Right.
comes off the top of the arch.
Yes. So the next stage was then surgery.
Yes. So after we finally got somebody to recognize the urgency, they monitored him very closely, and we scheduled him for surgery. So surgery was scheduled in July. Well, from April till July, his aneurysm grew so quickly. It was just astounding, just astounding. So had he waited for that 6 month or that check back in a year, he would have ruptured entirely. As a matter of fact, some of the activities that we used to do were quite physical. We spend a lot of time dressing up, and we do cosplay, and we dress up as pirates, and we donate our we do fundraisers, and we donate to Special Olympics. But we have a pirate ship float, and we attend major parades in the area. So my husband is that person who's very outgoing, and he's the person that's standing up on the front of the float, yelling out to the crowds. So he's always putting forth great physical effort. And
Yeah.
because of that, and that actually happened the day before surgery, we did our last parade.
So
He could have
sort of
ruptured
channeling
something
his inner Johnny Depp then.
exactly, and he looks just like it. He does a great job of it, but he was yelling at the top of his lungs and doing all these things that exerted
Jack Sparrow,
more
yeah.
pressure. So I was so surprised that he didn't rupture that day, and we made it to the hospital. He had surgery that following day. That was his last big hurrah,
Great.
and nobody would want
Okay.
to take that from him, right? So we were very fortunate that they were able to get him in. July
Yeah.
29th of 2019 was the day he had his surgery. So we're now 5 years post-op.
Right. And how is the stability of the condition?
His aneurysm is very stable, and he's doing very well with that. Um, because he's very tall and lean, he's never had an issue with blood pressure. So they keep him on a beta blocker to keep the heart under good control and not put additional pressure on vessels. But it has a tendency to drop his blood pressure too low in some cases, and it really creates a struggle for him with his level of energy. And he had a very physical factory job at General Motors. The job he had at the time that he had his aneurysm was one that was relatively low physical impact, but because of changes in the automotive industry, he very quickly ended up in a position where he was no longer able to do that same job, and they wanted to put him out on the production line. And he now, at this point in life, cannot handle that level of exercise. So,
Okay. I just want to come in there because you make the point about because he's tall and lean, never had an issue with blood pressure. Um, I would have to say there that I'm quite tall, um, and I have had issues with it's been in my family. Um, when I had this incident, I don't think my blood pressure was probably in great condition because I was going through a period of great grief. Um, so I'm not aware that physical shape is necessarily a definer of low or high blood pressure. It can very much depends on other factors too.
and his with the beta blocker, the beta blocker tends to drop his blood pressure too low.
Yeah, no,
So
it
he
would do
deals with
that. Yeah,
and he deals with a condition called hypostatic or hypotensive or orthostatic hypotension. Thank you.
yes. So when the blood pressure drops low, yeah. So
Yes.
just how was the recovery period? And of course, then we start to get into life changes, don't we? Really?
So because we live in a fairly rural area and it's quite a distance from the local hospital, there was not a lot of home care available to come out and help him immediately post-op, but because of my background, I was able to provide that service for him. So that was a blessing that I was able to do that. Again, it feels like tremendous responsibility on myself, right? Because if something goes wrong, who do you have to blame? So I made sure that I was extremely diligent about taking care of his wound. Um, we bought him a recliner and bought a foam mattress so that he could sleep in a reclining position for the first couple of months. And he was just the consummate patient. He just followed everything to the T as far as direction as to what you should do, what you can't do. He was very good about getting out and doing some walking. He got immediately involved in cardiac rehab. So he was a great patient. But again, that was a change in the role, right? You walk into a relationship and you're a wife and you're trying to have a relationship that's a 50-50 relationship, and all of a sudden that dynamic changes. So now you're responsible for a lot more than just a standard.
Absolutely. So, well, let's talk a bit more about that then, because you make a totally valid point, and clearly, this condition, this incident, this disease can have profound effects on relationships. And as you say, you were only married a year. It wasn't, you weren't planning on this. How, what sort of effect did that have on you emotionally? If you feel like uh, sharing,
I was
please,
sure.
if there's anything you don't want to go into, as we discussed beforehand, that's fine. So I'm
I
just
appreciate
giving,
that.
set whatever boundaries you want to set.
Thank you, John. Um, I'm always an advocate of knowledge. Knowledge is power, but sometimes a little knowledge can be a terrifying thing too. And I took all of that additional responsibility very personally, and it really increased my normal high energy, high level of anxiety personality right from the get go. It increased it that much more. So it was a major difference in our relationship in that I was a much more laid back person. I was somebody who was ready to go out and have fun. And, the kids, I didn't have children of my own, but he had kids, and the kids had just moved away from home and were on their own for the first time. So we felt this tremendous sense of relief and freedom. And we wanted to go out and be kids ourselves now that it was our turn,
Sure.
right? So
Mm.
now all of a sudden the situation changes. We can't leave the house and do too very much. A lot of what we did was very physical. So a lot of the activities that we used to do, we had to rethink and figure out what we're going to do in our spare time to have fun that was very different from what we had done previously. So there was a lot of pressure on me, and this is all self-induced, I get it, but there was a lot of pressure on me to help him come up with what are you going to do in your spare time while you're recovering. So fortunately, I had learned that he had a past history of being a ham radio operator and hadn't done it in a number of years, and he really enjoyed it. So I went out and bought him a ham radio, and we set him up with antennas, and we did all of these things so that he could still have some fun while not being as physically capable as he was able to be. We had to go out and buy a scooter so that we bought a farm right before we got married. Let me sidetrack here. It's 5 acres, which is not a huge amount of property, but it's certainly more than we had
It's
ever had
enough.
in our lives
Yeah.
before. It was enough.
Yeah.
So you know we were both used to being out there cutting the lawn several days a week because it took 3 days to cut the grass. We were out walking the woods, and there's a lot of stuff that had to be done. We bought an older farm that needed a lot of renovation with 5 barns, and so all of a sudden we couldn't do those things. So I had to buy, a new zero turn lawnmower so that I could cut a 62-inch swatch by myself, and try to take over some of those responsibilities because pushing a lawnmower was certainly out of the question for him. Um, Getting up
Okay.
on the barns and trying to replace sections of wood that had rotted out. All of those things were no longer able to be done
Okay.
by him at that point.
So popping my therapist hat on here for a second, um, you specifically going into kind of changes in lifestyle there, and I could see that for him could be very potentially frustrating because he's kind of, if you like, losing some of his masculine, expectation. And he does that, he fixes the barn, whatever. At the same time, I'm also picking up that you do a lot of, maybe have a tendency to kind of manage, take on a lot. You've hinted that you became more anxious. Would that be true?
Absolutely. And it's almost as though it became a motherly role. and that really upset the dynamic in the relationship. For
Ah,
being a year into a relationship, wrong time to have all that kind of stuff happen. So it's been a journey. We've now been married 7 years. Um, there were times that both of us were probably very ready to walk away. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but it really created some major challenges in the relationship, and it brought out that overly strong side of my personality, which I've had a hard time tucking back away. So we had to learn how to adjust to that, and it still is a struggle
so fundamentally, the balance of the relationship sort of changed then, didn't it?
tremendously.
Yes. Which isn't easy to manage, is it? Because there can be, resentment can come in, and there's nothing less sexy than resentment in a relationship.
You're absolutely right. And having gone through this and having the physical limitations he did initially, he got past that. But having those initial physical limitations was very much a taking away of his manhood, and then my having to take over all of those things at home personally that he used to do. And mind you, many times he didn't ask me to take those things over, right? He wanted to continue doing what he had always done, but I'm trying to be protective and I'm behind the scenes, and I'd get up earlier than him so that I could take care of something that I knew that was going to create a lot of energy expense for him, or something that he shouldn't be doing, but I knew that he wanted to be the man he'd do anyway. So I would sneak and I would take those things on. So he
So
further resented me for doing that.
I could imagine that would be a friction point. And would there be a sense of him feeling maybe emasculated by you doing
Very
that?
much so. Very much so.
Mm.
And
So
if you
have
want to
you
go
how
there,
that's can be an ongoing kind of live issue. How have you both managed that? Are you able to kind of communicate about these kind of tensions? Because it's so important, but some couples struggle to do that.
and it also impacted our sex life too. So if we want to talk about how it impacts everything, it absolutely impacted that too. So he ended up recovering very successfully, went back to work, developed some further complications, and had to come back out of work and have a couple of ablations done, and he hasn't been able to return to work. So he had gone through a period where he was really struggling with not being ready to leave the workforce, and that's a further blow to his manhood, right? So he's now going through counseling. He has a counselor that he meets with every week, and he spends an hour talking with that person, and that's been a tremendous help. I
Right.
also, when we were going through this, I also took on some counseling, and I did some exercises with trying to learn how to have mindful time and be more present and appreciate the things that I stopped looking at because I was so busy looking at everything else that needed to be done around the house, anticipating crisis. I know I shared with you, and I should probably be embarrassed, but let's be honest. I still have the backpack at the back door in the event of emergency so that we can run out the door because I know he's missing that tunica media. So no matter how much he recovers, that disease doesn't go away. So it's always, always, always present in the back of my mind. And it doesn't allow me to see. I can walk outside and it's a beautiful day and there are leaves on the trees and birds singing away, and my mind is spinning with all of these things that could be happening or things that I need to take care of now that he can't do, and I never stop anymore. So
Right. Well,
counseling has
I get a sense of that. So what you seem to be telling me there is you struggle for kind of stillness, and you're, where is that off button?
absolutely, and even if there's an off button physically, how do I stop myself from thinking about it all the time? Because he could
Right.
develop an aneurysm or rupture at any moment. So I envy
Well,
people.
he could, couldn't he? And he could not. So let's
Well,
spend a bit of time on that. So I'm picking up that you're a warrior. Yes, you like, so you checking every scenario. When we do things like that, they're giving us something, aren't they? Otherwise, we wouldn't do them. It may be they're not giving us the right thing, and maybe it's misplaced. But have a think about, what does the worrying give you? Do you think?
initially, knee jerk response is purpose. It isn't that sad, but it does, and it also continues to validate my background and my career now that I'm retired. It keeps me very involved and continuing to grow with that because I'm constantly reading. And but again, I said sometimes a little knowledge can be a bad thing. So because I'm always reading about all of these circumstances, I'm forcing myself to think about it at times where I don't need to think about it, and I need to learn to walk away and enjoy it.
Yes,
And
but the important thing there as well is that worrying isn't action, is it? Worrying is a hamster wheel, and worrying is a loop.
it is
And there's a psychological driver behind that. It's like, it's a form of rumination, obviously. And it's the mind looking to solve something. It's trying to put things right, isn't it? By doing all of this thinking, I will somehow, find a way through this kind of situation. It can be, no different to when a relationship breaks out up, and we all sort of spend these hours in our head trying to work it out. If I'd done this, if I put a bit more effort in there, if she hadn't done that, ding, 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 ding.
and I
Um,
recognize this, I could have prevented that. Yes. That's
and,
what it is for me.
and it's actually debilitating and dead energy, because it's like when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, we all start having a good worry, but you can't do anything till the morning, can you? But that our minds can run away with us, can't they? And
Absolutely.
the risk with that is that it becomes habitualized, and it becomes a kind of default. And as I
And
say, it's not action. I mean, when you say you have the bags at the door, I mean, that's a bit like maybe living in an earthquake zone, and you know, be ready, and one can interpret that as kind of good preparation in a way, but also at the same time we have to strike that balance between that we're not over catastrophizing, and letting our minds again run away with us to imagination, because in all of this as well, perception is everything. Yes, he might have an aneurysm, but also he might not. He might remain stable, and it's kind of which way do I look at it? And that can be important for our mental health, because if we spend too much time catastrophizing, it's like gets overwhelming, doesn't it? It gets dark.
certainly does, and it impacts my physical health as well. So I have to think
Uh-huh.
about taking care of me too. I've got to learn to let go to take care of me too. And as somebody who's a caregiver, I don't have to give daily care. He didn't have a stroke. He didn't lose his vision. He's not paralyzed. We don't have all of the other secondary complications that could easily have come along with it. So if anything, I have less and less justification for being that person who's the worry wart. And every time he walks out the door, I'm scared to death that he's going to do something to overexert. And I have to tell you, my husband was in martial arts, and we used to do a lot of things very physically. As I said, he tends to be that risk taker personality. So that helps drive that for me. But at the same time, he's been the most compliant patient, and he hasn't gone beyond the boundaries that they've set for him. So again, I have no justification for my
So
constant
okay, so
worry.
another way of framing that, when my point about worrying becoming habitualized, is what would you do with the space if you didn't worry?
Good question.
Have a think about that. It's like
That's the
if
one I
we
need to
if we
think
would if we look at the construction of a photograph or a classic, portraiture composition, you have the positive space and the negative space. All of a sudden there'd be this huge amount of space without the worrying.
And then I'd have to take care of the flower beds that are overgrown and all of the things around the yard and around the farm that have fallen behind.
Yeah. So worrying can also be a kind of procrastination, can't it? It can be a kind of an excuse for just like treading water, and maybe, I'll worry and I'll worry and I'll worry. And time, as John Lennon said, life is what happens to us while we're busy making plans.
You're right. And now that you say that, I do recognize that, you know what? It does keep me from getting some of the things done that I need to get done. Not that my place is a disaster, but there have been times where if I have to force myself to admit it, I probably have fallen back on, meaning I have, but I don't want to admit it, right? Have fallen back on, Well, I'm too busy preparing for all these other things in the event of crisis to be able to take care of what needs to be taken care of right now.
Yes. So one of the takeaways we could work on from this would be, to visually try and there are various techniques for that, hypnotherapy, hypnosis can be very good for this, dialing it down and actually coming up with a structure where you work towards striking more of a balance. So you carry on doing some of the worrying things, the preparations, but at the same time, you do take care of the flower beds, and you do like do some barn mending, and you do like factor in some other activities into your life for your own mental health as a
I think
carer.
that that's a great idea. And since you and I talked last, I was thinking about this and I thought, you know what? Just like I used to watch the news and worry about everything that was happening in the world, knowing that I had zero control over it, right? So why watching it makes me feel like I have better control of it happening or not. I've had to learn to turn the news off. Maybe I allow myself to start 1 hour each day or 30 minutes each day to sit there and do the preparation for the crisis that hopefully will never come. And then the rest of the day, I don't allow myself to do that. I have to make a conscious decision to not go there when I feel it get into my head.
Well, information nerviosa is an is a developing condition where there's overload of information, often driven by news, and people get addicted to news. And again, it's catastrophizing, because generally speaking, when I last checked, the media doesn't spend a lot of time on the good stuff. It's telling us about, the latest missile attack wherever it might be in the world at the moment. And again, that can be very destructive because it begins to become habitualized.
It does. And then, there are other factors that play into all of it too, but it all fits together. I have an elderly mother, a father who recently passed away. So she's starting to develop dementia. I'm doing a lot of caretaking with her. I also have two stepdaughters who have mental illness and learning disabilities, who I'm working on trying to get through a vocational rehabilitation program so they can get long-term gainful employment because they're both in their 30s now and not completely self-sufficient adults. So I feel like I have so much of it coming at me all at one time, so many directions, that it's hard to remember. I don't have to be this mother to my husband right now. He's probably the least of my concerns, and I need to give him a break, and I need to give us a break when we're at home and away from all of the other stuff. So if I want to spend time focusing on worrying and micromanaging everybody else's stuff, do it there. Try to give myself a break at home and give
You
us a
have
break.
you have a very full plate, Terry, but it also sounds to me like that's how you find meaning in your life. You take it all on, you look after everyone, and again, it's back to my point about it is about balance, isn't it? So, what do you do? Some things that take you out of all of this because it's
I
important, isn't it?
I do. About 3, 4 years ago, I used to play bass when I was a youngster, and I would tell my husband all the time, he loves to sing. He's a great singer, and he loves to go do karaoke. So we'll go to local places and do karaoke, and I always missed playing an instrument. And I really enjoy the bass guitar. So about 3 or 4 years ago, he bought me a bass guitar by surprise for Christmas, and I just was thrilled beyond thrilled. So I've actually gotten to the point now where I've traded that one up, and I now own three other bass guitars, and I've joined a
Right.
band, and that's my thing. So at night, when I'm able to finally shut everything off, everything in my world has been taken care of as far as what I feel I can accomplish in a day. I then go sit out in a barn and I play my bass guitar. And on a perfect night, I'll spend 3 hours because I have the ability to remove myself mentally from everything else that's going on in my world. And I have such peace when I do that. I need to find more of that. Playing the bass is not the solution though, for more hours than three in a day. I think three in a day is sufficient there. But I joined a band too, having a ball.
That's wonderful. I'm not aware of an aortic hope band, but maybe there's one to be formed.
We're talking about it.
That's great. So, well, as we begin to maybe come towards the end of the session, um, can you maybe well, how can I phrase it? For all that these things happen to us in life, and they can kind of crush us, they can bring us down. It's important, isn't it, that life does go on day by day. We have to do things. We have to live. And it does sound to me as well that although you both have had a lot of issues to deal with, you've got a very full plate. At the same time, I sort of pick up that you're quite a determined, positive person. You try to get through.
I do, and I did the same when I took on scuba diving because I have this tremendous fear of water. I have this tendency to like to face my fears head on and show my fears that there's nothing to be afraid of. So I address everything in life that same way. Um, and I'm going to take this as a personal challenge as well. You'll see. I'm going to make it my mission to force myself to put the suitcases away that are by the door. I'll know where they're at in the closet, but they don't need to be by the door anymore. And
These
to
are the
start
ones. These are the emergency backpacks.
exactly.
Yeah,
And it's a reminder to my husband all the time too. How fair is that to him, right? So he doesn't need to see that either.
yeah. There is a risk with that, isn't it? That you're kind of staying with the potential morbidity of that.
Correct. And I saw a post on Aortic Hope the other day that really made me think about this tremendously. There was somebody who was planning a vacation overseas, and I'm thinking, how do you have that level of comfort that you can walk away from that medical group that's been so supportive to you if something were to happen, how vulnerable you're making yourself. But then again, you can't just stop living. I mean, if anything, this reminds you that you need to live more because most of us don't
Totally.
focus on that, right? So I
Yeah.
need to bring myself to that place. I'm going to start.
But
That's what I'm going
but
to start
but but you
focusing.
identify a very big step for a lot of people, because I understand that. I mean, last time I came to the US, I had to take out private insurance and so on and so forth. And what can often happen when we're traveling is we lose the familiarity of that medical backup, don't we? There's my hospital, there's the pharmacy if I need my pills. So we do go into a kind of another land, literally, obviously.
Yes.
um, and it is challenging. But the point about that as well is by taking on those kind of challenges, that then builds our confidence and we can build our resilience. Like think, oh, I got through that, I did that, rather than the kind of, it's so easy, I think, with this condition to kind of shrink back into like fearful defensiveness. And then comfort zones, comfort zones aren't known for getting bigger in terms of growing. Comfort zones tend to get smaller because, like, I'm safe with that, I'm safe with that, but I'm only safe with that.
And I also thought I'm not giving him the space to truly heal from having undergone this experience. This was quite traumatic for him as well. So as long as I keep ruminating about it, and as long as I keep myself in that space mentally, I'm not allowing him to grow beyond it too. And that's not fair of me to do to him. So
I
I
think
really
that's really, I think that's really aware and honest of you to see that.
thank
And that's, yes, you're right. It's very important. His own opportunity to heal and also to take responsibility for his own destiny and his own life. That's important for his mental life health. I haven't spoken with him. I'm talking with you. But he has his own life to live and he's got to take his own responsibilities. And as you say, you did you have slipped into somewhat of a mother role. That's not necessarily a healthy place.
not at all. Yesterday, for the first time after I spoke with you, he had a senior karate class, and this is his way of getting back into some level of physical activity now that he's not working. And it was all I could do to not jump in the car and go with him to that class because I know they don't have an AED on site. I know they don't have somebody who knows CPR, so I always rode with him. This is like the third time he's done that class. I actually let him go to class yesterday for the first time by himself. Don't I sound like a mother? But boy, it was such a
Somewhat. I hope you didn't make him wear short trousers.
not at all. he It was so freeing for me though, for him to walk away by himself. And now that we're retired together, we're together 24/7, right? It was so freeing. I had the best hour of my day.
Of
And I don't
course
want
you
to say
did. Yeah.
I had the best hour because my husband wasn't there, but at the same time, it allowed me to walk away mentally
I
from
can
all of the stress.
imagine there was, oof,
It was. It
yeah,
was. And he made it back home just fine.
there you are. And then, that's then that day put to bed, isn't it? And then that's another notch of like he's done that. I mean, I'm impressed. Karate, wow. You know,
And it's very slow and very deliberate movement. As a matter of fact, Kevin Songer has the program that he has, and my husband's going to start getting involved in that. We're looking into Tai Chi together and things
great,
of that nature. But
good,
it's been a
good, good,
significant life
wonderful.
change.
Yeah. So as we start to close up, I'm just going to hand back to Joshua um, to hear if we've got anybody commenting, saying hello,
Let's say hi
asking
to
him.
let's say hi to Rob and Tom. And Rob says, "Good for you, Terry."
Thanks, Rob.
Hi
It's
to you
tough to
both.
live with me.
Anybody else?
No, sir. Take it away.
Okay. So, Terry, really, really good to be speaking with you. I think there can be a lot of takeaways from this, aren't there? Can't there? But then things like that idea of dialing it down, the worrying, and we can do that visually as an exercise. You can imagine, sit there with your worry, and you kind of like score it, and you go 0 to 10. Well, my worry's up at 9 or 10, and you picture it as a dial. Sit in a chair. You think I'm going to just dial it down to 7 or 8, and then you try and take that with you. And every time, then the tendency to worry comes back in. You develop the awareness to sort of say to yourself, "Stop it." You know,
I'm gonna do a 3 time a day anxiety check-in on myself and say, okay, what's my level of worry or anxiety right now?
right? Yes, because I repeat that really important point that worrying is dead energy. It doesn't do anything other than kind of wear us out. It's tiring, isn't it?
It kills me. I don't have control of the world like I think I do.
Yes, we all have the God complex in us. Don't worry. Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add? The floor is completely yours. For
I think
people out
it's
there, things you've
sure.
learned, things you'd like,
I think
things you'd like.
it's really
I'm not you, and you're in a situation that I'm not.
I think it's really important that when you go through what my husband's gone through and you step into that caregiver role, it's really important to have support, to have people to talk to. It's really important to recognize at what point it's okay to start stepping back from that role. And that's the part that I didn't figure out. And that's the part that I desperately need. At 5 years post op, certainly time to make that happen, if not several years ago. So that I think is probably the key takeaway more than anything else here today.
Yeah, so that's really useful. It's like moving on, isn't it?
Yes.
And as you say, 5 years, that's a significant amount of time. And if you think of, I could talk a lot about that. The difference between me 1 year to 5 years to 10 years to now 18 years. Yes, and
Yes.
you know not checking in with myself when the worries come as well.
And knowing that it's a disease that's ongoing and that there's always risk for something, at least we've gone through it. I know how to respond should it become a crisis again,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
I need to let him move past it as well. So it's time to dial back.
yeah. Well done to you both, and thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you being here.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Joshua, and thank you to everybody who's tuning in.